This is Skywatch Media News for the third week of June 2018. Geologists who have been studying Hawaii's Kilauea volcano are reporting that its magnetic field is flowing in the opposite direction to the entire planet, which is therefore sending compasses into an uncontrollable spin. What geologists have found is that molten rock below the Mount Kilauea volcano contains vast amounts of iron. In essence, it is a sea of magnets. What happened was that the iron cooled and became trapped in the molten rock, causing the poles to face the opposite way of the rest of the planet. Scientists believe that what is happening below Kilauea is a contributing factor as to why the Earth is in the process of a pole reversal. What is so disconcerting about the recent findings is that the Earth's magnetic field is in decline and that a reversal is rapidly approaching. Researchers at California Polytechnic State University and at the University of Wisconsin in Madison are saying that the volcanic rock contains evidence of a prior shift, which then is an indication or a given sign of an imminent polarity flip. According to the recent geological evidence, we are approaching one of these transitional states because the magnetic field is weakening and it is rapidly decreasing. As shown in this diagram, the magnetic poles are moving further to the northeast over the past century, and they are continuing on that trajectory, which then tells us that it is no longer a matter of if a shift will occur, but when. The timeline for this event is one that requires predictability. Much like seismic activity and the study of plate movements, it is nearly impossible to surmise when the event will occur. It could happen long after you or I are gone, or it could happen much sooner. But the signs of the next reversal have been placed into motion, and that has happened in the last 100 years, as indicated in this graphical evidence. It looks like scientists are busy providing subtle warnings to the world that something is about to happen that the public is unprepared for. Scientists warned the world last year that there would be a major increase in seismic activity in 2018. And the reasons they made that announcement was because there was a mysterious slowdown of the Earth's rotation. Now there is something even more dire that is on the minds of scholars these days. How long will humanity prevail on Earth? The prognosis is bleak, and here could be the reasons why. Mathematicians from the University of Rochester in New York have determined that there are definitive ways in which mankind will meet its demise. Now, they used mathematical models to actually determine how long civilization will exist, and the results are bad news. Now, the first outcome was the most common one that was observed by researchers. As the population on Earth continues to grow, the planet would spiral past its limits with the eventual depletion of natural resources. Now, this would be a gradual decline in that it would evolve over time. In contrast, the other outcome showed a sudden collapse, where the world is too sensitive to changes and unable to cope with the rapid expansion of civilization. Would you care to wager which scenario will happen first? The hypotheses used to determine the findings were centered around two important factors. One was the growing population of the planet, and the other involved the dramatic effects of climate change. The scholars indicated that a gradual decline would occur when 70% of humanity dies due to environmental effects of climate change, and this prior to accepting the reality of climate decline as an extinction-level event. Contrary to the gradual decline, a sudden collapse would occur when the Earth is incapable of recovering from the damage that is incurred by mankind over the years, in which the extinction of intelligent life would begin very quickly. Educators and researchers are fully aware of the bleak forecast for human civilization, As is often said, it does not take a rocket scientist to figure out what's happening to the planet. When NASA and SpaceX are focusing their attention on a mission to Mars and the possibility of establishing civilization on the red planet, it all begins to make sense. Researchers now believe that the damage to the planet is so severe that any effort to make changes is too little and too late. What happened to prior civilizations is now on the verge of happening to this one. Unlike other indicators of our demise, such as the invasion of extraterrestrials, worlds in collision, or the approach of Planet X, which the tabloids endlessly belittle, this new scientific study could be an eye-awakening moment to the reality of mass extinction on the planet. There is so much happening right now across the planet that it is becoming more difficult to keep up with every important event. But as they used to say in the days of the traveling circus, regardless of the difficulty and the uncertainty of each new day, the show must go on. But here is another reality. A group of international scientists have just announced a troubling observation, which was published on June 14th in the journal Nature. The latest assessment of Antarctica's ice sheets is confirming that the meltdown has accelerated sharply since the year 2012, and there are no indications of a slowdown. What this infers is that sea level is expected to rise at a rate that will flood unprepared coastal communities. This despite persistent warnings that coastlines are endangered by rising seas. The findings show that the rate of ice loss is alarming. It's tripled over the past 5 years as compared to the previous 2 decades, which implies that sea levels will rise an additional 2.5 feet before the end of the century. According to the European Space Agency, the ice shelves continue to retreat. The warming ocean waters are melting the ice shelves from below, which means that more ice will be lost from the interior. This is no joke, folks. If the melting continues at this rate, the flooding across coastal regions will be unimaginable. The meltdown is already causing problems for coastal cities in the United States. Just last week, the NOAA reported that the frequency of high tide flooding has doubled in the past 30 years, with some cities experiencing at least 20 days of high tide flooding in just the past year. That includes anyone living in large coastal cities, such as Miami or New York, where the risk is that much greater. This animated diagram provides a detailed understanding of the extent of the ice loss observed in Antarctica and why the problem of sea level rise is growing each year. Here is what has been observed thus far by scientists and what information has been released to the public at this time. Between 1992, when detailed satellite measurements first began, and the year 2004, Antarctica lost about 50 gigatons of ice per year. But in the years between 2004 and 2017, that rate has tripled to about 160 gigatons of ice lost per year. The recent acceleration is partly driven by climate cycles, including El Niño, as well as rising temperatures. In West Antarctica, most of the ice loss has been from the massive Pine Island and the Thwaites glaciers, which have been retreating rapidly. In the Amundsen and the Bellenhausen seas, ice shelves that slow the flow of the glaciers behind them have thinned by up to 18% since the early 1990s. As warming water has reached underneath them in some areas, the ice is thinning by as much as 19 to 20 feet per year. A November 2017 study suggested that a rapid collapse of both glaciers is possible which would raise sea levels by more than 3 feet by the end of the century. Around the Antarctic Peninsula, where air temperatures have risen sharply, more than 13,000 square miles of ice shelf have been lost since the 1950s, according to this study. What scientists are equally concerned about is that the intrusion of warm water is leading to more fractures in the ice. As represented in the Pine Island Glacier, warm water intrusions are melting the ice from below, so much so that the ice in those channels is cracking. That allows surface meltwater to flow into the fractures, which can then destabilize the ice shelf and increase the chances that big chunks will break off. The loss of ice is one big chain reaction. As the ice gets thinner, it becomes more strained and more susceptible to all of the processes that I mentioned. As the climate worsens, the rivers of meltwater will increase. As these rivers interact with the ice fractures, the melting process accelerates. The magnitude of the meltdown cannot be underestimated. It is a serious concern with catastrophic consequences for our future. Is the color ball on this screen yellow or is it green? Sounds like a trick question, but if you were paying attention, you saw both. But does the perception of what you saw make any difference to you, or should you even care? Here is the underlying message. It is difficult to wake up to the news in these times, realizing that so many people are completely oblivious to the changes that are happening under their feet and in the sky above. For them, it looks the same, and nothing has changed. Take a look at these images that developed in the sky over Nebraska on June 13th. People who witnessed the strange cloud formations have acknowledged that they were terrified by the almost instantaneous transformation of the sky. When I end a video presentation by asking you to look to the sky, I do not mean that to be a metaphorical expression, but rather an implied suggestion, because it is understood that by opening your eyes and seeing all that is before you, even the most insignificant of things, you then begin to recognize the bigger picture, and you gain a better perspective of the show that is being presented to the world. When viewers ask me whether the Earth is entering into a series of catastrophic events, my answer to them is always the same. In order to determine and fully comprehend the extent of the changes being wrought on this planet, you must first open your eyes and observe everything that is happening in your earthly surroundings, so that you may become aware of the critical issues that confront the world in a time when great changes are apparent. The Native Americans knew of the advent of change, and they spoke with foresight as a warning to future generations. So to know the answer is to seek the truth. As you look to the sky, remember that your earthly life is but for a time. And even though the earth may change, the knowledge that you gain in your life will last an eternity. Thanks for watching.